Disclaimer: this is audio horror fiction. If darkness or the creatures it holds scares you, leave now. Still listening? Good. Then let's begin. My workplace has rats. Pardon me, had rats. We don't tell the customers, obviously. That would just cause panic, and lawsuits, and health and safety inspections, and we wouldn't want that. It's a mutually kept contract between us, the employees, and them, the bosses, that if we don't talk about the rats, we get to keep our jobs. Times are tough, and we're all replaceable. No point in taking a stand. There's always someone else willing to do our job. So we just smile and lie to the customers that ask, and the bosses take care of the rest. You get used to them eventually, running through the walls, learning to store your food safely, ignoring their screaming, their fucking, their necks snapping, and the useless traps we put out, their beady little eyes watching you in the dark. Get used to wearing boots out of fear of them biting your ankles, and so you can kick them to death if you needed to. They were mostly only in the basement, an out-of-the-way area where we kept the copy room and printer, with boxes of old files and records piled high and haphazardly. Interns had to brave the poorly lit room if we needed something. Clients never saw it. Thank goodness for small miracles. The biggest rat of all lived in the cubicle next to mine. His name was Gerald. His face was lean and wiry, with hungry, shining eyes. The man didn't shave or shower. His body was covered in thick black hair, all of it greasy and sweaty, and held onto the pungent odor of whatever he ate for many days. Unfortunately for me, he liked curry. A lot. I don't think he could smell it since he smoked heavily. Even with all this against him, it was possible to see that underneath all of it, the man might have once been handsome, if not for the twisted sneer permanently pasted onto his face. Gerald was the worst kind of bully. Black sheep's son of the CEO, given a simple, placating office job. It would have been a career suicide to speak out against him. Some people did anyway, and were let go shortly thereafter, citing lack of work, even though we were all scrambling and pulling doubles and triples just to keep our heads above water. But we all knew better. HR wasn't much help either. Lawsuits were not cheap, and so the best they could do for his victims was a sad smile, a shoulder shrug, and an extra complimentary cup of shitty office coffee. I learned all this very quickly upon starting with this company that shall not be named. Gerald always picked on the new fish. I was told to just grin and bear it by my seniors. He'd get bored or someone new would be hired. Eventually. That eventually would stretch to 2 very long years. Gerald never physically or explicitly sexually harassed me, nor did he make references to my open gayness. He was smarter than that. Harassment like that could involve getting outside authorities involved, and then someone might actually stop him. No, Gerald was brilliant in his wickedness. His campaign of harassment towards me was subtle, but ever present. Implicit harassment was easy for him. A lewd gesture behind cruel eyes, jokes about sexual assault, tripping me when I wasn't looking, or taking credit for my work was par for the course, and he brushed off my complaints masterfully. Can't you take a joke, kid? God, you're clumsy. Watch where you're going, you might hurt me next time. Jesus, why are you so mad? That business proposal was my idea to begin with. You're so selfish. I almost began to believe in my incompetence myself. The worst was always my food. No matter what I did, it was never safe from him. Every day there would be a slopping wet bite out of my sandwich, and my soda would be half empty and nearly flat. Any candy or treats would be only crumbs, and fresh fruit replaced with old and rotten alternatives. I am still impressed at his ability to find rotten fruit. Once, he even spit with lots of phlegm into my coffee, right in front of myself and several associates, and watched gleefully as I forced myself to choke it down, as refusing would be seen as a gross insult worthy of a write-up. On the plus side, I lost a lot of weight at that job and hit my ideal body weight for only having 2 meals a day. But it was a miserable time, hungry and shaky, and so constantly on alert that I threw up on more than one occasion and still get the shakes if I get nervous these days. It was like being in high school again, only worse because I couldn't pop him in the nose or slam my knee into his jaw and walk away with only a suspension and a record that would be wiped clean when I reached adulthood. All of my high school bullies had fucked off when I started hitting back. But you couldn't do that in the real world. Assault charges and jail time would be ruinous. There was nothing to do but grin and bear it and wait. Everything came to a head on my second anniversary with the company. There wasn't a celebration, although there were backpats and a card, and someone managed to sneak me a single bite of cupcake past Gerald's keen eyes. I found out quickly that there was no sneaking anything past Gerald. He had allowed that cupcake in the card and any well wishes to happen, because he knew that he would make his contribution to the day all the more poignant. When I got back from my lunch break, where I didn't eat anything, as per usual, I found a neatly wrapped package perched on my desk and my mouth ran dry. Gerald sauntered over and, using his best innocent, malign coworker voice, said, "Hey kid, I got you a present. I know, you didn't want to make a big deal about today, but you deserve it." The way he said deserve made my skin crawl. I eyed the package. I could refuse to open it. I could take it and march it to the garbage in our office and stuff it so far down it would never see sunlight. I could do that. But Alice's cubicle was right next to the trash can, and she was fucking Gerald's dad, and didn't like me. With a colossal amount of student debt still looming, a stagnating job market, and inability to move back in with my parents, I knew I was without options. I had to appease Gerald. "You shouldn't have," I replied to him as dryly as I safely could. He just smiled widely, lips stretching over yellowed teeth, rotten breath escaping from his mouth unbidden. I tried to keep my hands from shaking as I slowly tore open the pretty paper to reveal a plain brown box beneath. A new scent hit, cloying and rotten, and I gagged hard. Opening the lid revealed a rotten, bloated rat corpse. Maggots squirmed in its squishy body, one glazed eye staring morbidly up at me. There was some putrid liquid making the bottom soggy and fragile under my fingers. I vomited into the box, unable to stop myself, and the weakened cardboard gave out, spilling all of the contents into my lap. Some might have even splashed up and gotten into my mouth. I was so in shock that nothing registered for several minutes. When my senses started working again, Gerald was still braying like a hyena, and Alice was laughing along with him. Whipping my head to and fro showed me that the rest of my co-workers were pointedly looking down in a way, their shoulders sloped with their own shame and cowardice. Tears pricked in my eyes and my body shook. When I tried to stand, Gerald pushed me back into my chair. "You already had your lunch break," he sneered. "I have to use the bathroom," I muttered weakly under my breath. "You have 2 hours until you're 15. Use it then. Now get back to work." Gerald shoved me into my desk and walked away. I'd like this part of the story to go the same way you would, where I fight the good fight and win, but that isn't how the story goes. That day, I bowed my head and did as Gerald instructed. But the next day is a different story. I hid in the copy room that day, shuddering at every skitter and sound, eyes darting frantically, wondering if that would be the day I got bit by one of the rats. But even despite my fear, I knew it was far more bearable than seeing Gerald's smug face every time I looked up from my desk. I had volunteered to clean and reset the rat traps, a once-a-month job that meant I could take my sweet time in the Gerald-free basement. The storage closet where we kept the cleaning supplies and rat poison had a massive door that could probably survive a nuclear blast. I needed both hands and much straining to get it open. At least it kept the rats out. When I got in there, I quickly understood how Gerald had gotten the rat he gave me to begin with. There was a brand new stockpile of hundreds of boxes of rat poison, stacked floor to ceiling and almost a foot deep. I laughed when I saw what was on the boxes. Rat crack, they proudly proclaimed in large white letters, with a picture of a frothing, wide-eyed rat snorting crack through a straw. The instructions on the back stressed that this was not rat poison, but a drug so addictive in its nature that the rats would do anything for it, risk any trap, and the best part was, it was completely non-toxic to humans. I poured a bit of the white powder into my hand and gagged a little. The smell of the poison was strong and abrasive, and I felt my nose burn just from that little whiff. I never questioned, nor did I find out where my office got such a poison from. I only cared about whether they would notice if it were gone or not. They didn't, and so 3 boxes came home with me over the course of the week. And so my experiments began. I baked the poison into bread, and became a decent baker while doing so, starting with only a spoonful and going up from there. While doing that, I prepared the second half of my plan, the rats. I had to make some junkies. The hardest part of it all was disabling the traps and making sure that no one got wind of my dealings. To start off, I poured a little of the poison in the corner and then waited. It worked amazingly. All I had to do was leave some food and water with the crack to keep my little junkies from starving, and the rest took care of itself. The first few batches of bread came out poorly, and it was 2 weeks and another box of rat poison later before I finally got what I was looking for. The smell had not gone away, which would be my biggest obstacle. I took the chance anyway. "Your sandwiches taste different, stupid," Gerald yelled at me the next day, fat finger poking my stomach as his other hand squeezed my sandwich to death. "My mom baked the bread for me," I explained meekly, trailing off and rubbing the back of my head. Gerald chuckled and then doubled down on his attack on my sandwich. I buried my head in my crossed arms and laid them on the desk, so I could be sure he wouldn't see my suppressed laughter. By that point, the rats would nearly frenzy when I brought them their treat. I would throw an entire box in and they would destroy it in an instant. I started leaving them for longer periods in between fixes and testing their resilience against stronger materials. It wasn't long before they could smell the rat crack from inside a sealed wooden box, which would fall just as easily to their hungry teeth as anything else. By the time I got the rats to a satisfactory level of addiction, it had been 3 months, and I was up to the maximum amount of rat poison I could mix into the bread without compromising its structural integrity. I mixed it with my dessert, sprinkled it into the soup, and ground it into smoothies. Anything of mine that Gerald would eat got a little bit of the poison put inside of it. When Gerald sweated, the scent of poison spilled out, as abrasive and cloying as ever. If the other co-workers noticed, they smartly kept their mouths shut. My hypothesis had been correct. This rat crack was just like Gerald's shitty curry. The more he ate, the more he smelled like it. I waited almost 3 months more for the perfect opportunity, letting things fall into a comfortable rhythm. I had one chance to make the second half of my plan work. It was a hot, sticky August day when it happened. Gerald reeked of the rat crack in our air conditioner-free office. I had left the fridge empty of my lunch that day, and left some crumbs of chocolate on my desk before conspicuously sneaking down to the basement. I could practically feel the copy room thrumming as I approached, my rats starving for food in a fix. Gerald caught my shoulder before I got to the door, whirling me around harshly to face him. "What you doing, kid? Trying to hide something from me?" I said nothing, my face neutral and downcast, as I turned my head away from him. He grabbed me by the hair and yanked my head forward, pulling us nose to nose so that he could look me in the eyes. I asked you a question, or would you like me to tell Human Resources that you are being deliberately insubordinate and causing undue friction in the workplace? It was my birthday a couple days ago. I got some leftover cake and... Gerald interrupted me by dropping me to the ground. And you hid it from your old pal Jerry in the coffee room. I can't believe you. Always trying to hide things from me. Treat me like I'm some enemy. We're supposed to be friends, kid. I sighed. Behind the printer. See, now that wasn't so hard. I'll let it slide this once because it's your birthday, and so we can keep being friends, alright? Gerald tousled my hair condescendingly as he walked into the coffee room. I held my breath, counting his steps towards the door. A little more. A little more. He swung it open lazily, and then I was up. I threw my weight into him, knocking him into the room and slamming the door behind him, jamming the lock from the outside so it wouldn't turn. Then I waited. It didn't take long. The rats were on him in a second. I'm only sorry that the door had such a small window for me to look through. Gerald screamed as they swarmed him, their teeth ripping through his flesh with ease. He managed to stand for a brief moment, eyes wet with tears and fear. He pounded on the door, begging me to let him out. I only smiled and leaned on the cool door as I watched. Blood shot from some of the open wounds running down his body, soaking and making his clothes slick, causing the rats to slide off. He must have pissed himself somewhere during the initial attack, a puddle of light-colored liquid pooling at his feet. Gerald threw himself face down, perhaps trying to dislodge the rats on his front, his arms flailing and legs kicking at anything he could hit. More rats were swarming his body, drawn by the scent of blood, and he let out another inhuman shriek before his vocal cords were torn from his throat. In minutes, there was only a writhing mass of rats and flesh and hot blood twitching and steaming in the cool basement air. I drank in the sight, satisfied with my experiment, and unlocked the door. I rubbed my eyes, added some eye drops, and then ran upstairs, screaming and crying my head off. I blubbered and sniffled like a good little traumatized bystander, explaining that I had taken Gerald to have some of my cake and the rats just went crazy and swarmed and I was so scared and ran away. The rest of the office comforted me, the relief in their eyes and shoulders audible. I was the office hero, even if no one would say it. The police were called, eventually. When they got down there, they had to burn the rats off with a flamethrower, as they were still swarming, eating their way through the rats beneath them that had gorged themselves until they died. The storage room was empty of rat crack, and no one knew anything about it. There was nothing left of Gerald's body either, so no autopsy could be conducted. Gerald's death was written off as a freak accident, and the building was quarantined, and then eventually condemned. The subsequent investigation led to a lot of counts of harassment, embezzlement, fraud, and safety violations. Most of the bosses in HR were either let go or quietly disappeared. My co-workers and I were scooped up by the remaining boss who hadn't been into anything illegal, and we were taken with him to a new firm. It's been 6 months and things are good. My workplace has no rats, but if they ever do come back, well, I have enough rat poison left to last me for decades. Thank you all so much for listening. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to leave a like and subscribe and share to help feed the dark machine.